What is up, you guys? Teller checking in for UFC Austin. We got a main event matchup of two top-ranked lightweight fighters, and this fight carries a lot of weight for what's going to be happening in this lightweight division moving forward. Beneil Dariush is coming off a tough loss, but you guys know we're not overlooking him. He is very, very dangerous and tricky in the cage. Arman Tsarukyan, this is the fighter that this card is really centered around. In my opinion, he is the dark horse of the lightweight division. I'll never forget how he took on Islam Makhachev on short notice at just 22 years old, making his UFC debut, and how closely contested that fight was. He has been on my radar ever since then. Since that loss, in my opinion, he should be 8-0 in the octagon. He just had that one loss where he lost a closely contested fight, a split decision loss to Mateusz Gamrot in the 5-round main event fight. I thought that he won that fight. He should be 8-0 in my opinion, and I think that he matches up the best against Islam Makhachev. So that's a rematch that I am eyeing. Now, as of now, it looks like they're going to be running the Islam versus Charles Oliveira fight back. Justin Gaethje is rumored to maybe be having a trilogy fight with DP, maybe on that UFC 300 card. There's been some rumors going around. Other than that, Chandler versus McGregor whenever that happens. And other than that, there's really no one barking up the tree to get that next shot at Makhachev. I mean, you could say, maybe the winners of the DP versus Gaethje fight, of course, or the McGregor versus Chandler fights, maybe those guys would be next. So maybe not. We shouldn't completely overlook those fights. Those are big fights. But just keep an eye on Arman Tsarukyan. If he goes out here and gets the job done, this is a fighter. I think that it's realistic that we see the gold around his waist one day. I'm just saying. I've been saying that for a long time, and I want to make sure that I state that once again. Okay. Besides that, we got a pretty exciting card, if you ask me, at least as far as the main card goes. Dan Hooker versus Bobby Green. Dan Hooker, another top-ranked lightweight fighter, but a little bit on the other side of the hill, if you ask me, but an exciting matchup against Bobby Green. Davison Figueiredo going up in weight to take on Rob Font. That's a great fight. Kelvin Gastelum versus Sean Brady. Seriano versus Stoltzfus, and an underrated fight in Khalil Rountree versus Azamat Murzakanov. Okay, the preliminary fights, we also have two OGs in the game. Clay Guida will be taking on Joaquim Silva, and Miesha Tate taking on Julia Avila. Avila stepping back in the cage after quite a long layoff. So I like this fight card. I'm excited for it. You guys know we got some spots to make some money. I'm not coming off a profitable event. Had a little bit of a shaky card there, but just two plays for this most recent card at UFC Vegas 82. You guys can see the recap here on the channel. Some slight losses, not worried about it at all. We're bouncing back in a major way here. So with no further ado, we're going to jump into the first fight. Please smash this like button. Smash the like button right now before we jump into that. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already, and please go follow me on all my social media. All right, guys, let's jump into this first fight.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
Kicking the card off, we have a women's flyweight matchup between Jamey-Lyn Horth and Veronica Hardy. Veronica, formerly known as Veronica Macedo. You guys remember she was coming into her last fight, coming off quite a long layoff, and looked phenomenal in her return fight. Now married to Dan Hardy, training over at Hardy Wallhead MMA over there in the UK. If you guys are familiar with Jim Wallhead, Jim Judo Wallhead, and Dan Hardy, obviously a former UFC title contender, a guy that fought for the belt. So surrounding herself with some high-level talent there. And again, she looked phenomenal in her last fight where she went out there and really put a beatdown on Juliana Miller. Now, the only problem with that victory, as good as she looked, Juliana Miller has proven to be a horrendous fighter, at least not a UFC caliber fighter. She went out in her next fight, got knocked out by Luana Santos. She's a girl that has that jiu-jitsu base, and she's just very sloppy with her overall MMA game. So you got to be careful how highly you regard that performance. But just note that Veronica Hardy did look very, very sharp in that return fight, and she's only 28 years old. So as she was out of the octagon for that long layoff, attending to some things in her personal life, I think getting married to Dan Hardy and just doing whatever she was doing, probably enjoying life, making money outside the octagon. She was definitely sharpening up her skills. Dan Hardy is a guy that's obsessed with the sport of MMA, even though he's not fighting. He's always training and always studying the game. So I think that she's she definitely did put some work in, and I think that she's obviously a much better version of herself, even with that long layoff, as she made the return here. And then you got Jamey-Lyn Horth, who Jamey-Lyn Horth just made her UFC debut. And although she got the victory there, she's undefeated. She got the victory against Hailey Cowan, who Hailey Cowan was coming in, making her UFC debut as well. Cowan, a girl that kind of snuck a split decision victory on DWCS. She could have potentially lost that fight. She's kind of a sloppy fighter, tough girl, but a little sloppy. In that fight, I think you can argue that Hailey Cowan could have potentially took that fight. And if you take a look at the decision where you see Jamey-Lyn Horth wins a unanimous decision, you might think that, or you might falsely remember that she was a lot more dominant in that fight than she was, because you could have argued every round could have went either way in that fight. Jamey-Lyn Horth spent a lot of time on her back in that fight. I believe almost a total of 4 to 5 minutes on her back in that fight. She had some moments as well. And, but I wasn't too impressed with her UFC debut. Now, she will have a 3-inch reach advantage in this matchup here. She'll have some of that natural size advantage against Hardy, which is nothing new. Remember, Hardy even used to fight up in the bantamweight division back in the day. So she's fought some large women before. And again, we take a look at the work Hardy did against Miller, had 7 minutes and 30 seconds of control time, 4 for 4 on her takedowns. Don't be surprised if she slips in a takedown. I know she's undersized, but she's slick with her overall skill set. I wouldn't be surprised if she potentially slipped in a takedown and had some control time in this fight. And on the feet, I think that she is shown to be sharper with her striking. I'm edging Veronica Hardy here, aka Veronica Macedo. I'm edging her to win this fight, and we'll go take a look at the betting line, where she opened up as a plus 146 on Jazz Sports. She opened up as the dog across the board in all these books, and we've seen action steadily coming in on her, which in my opinion was to be expected because that line made no sense. I just rewatched the tape on Jamey-Lyn Horth in her UFC debut. I don't really understand why she was being opened up as high as a minus 180 on Jazz Sports. That's ridiculous, right? That line was way off. I think people are just looking into the size advantage, the undefeated record, 6-0, not really having any solid names under her resume at the moment. She had one somewhat legitimate win before coming into the UFC against a tough Brazilian chick, but not too high in what I've been seeing from her. I will edge Veronica Hardy to get the job done, with the value obviously being on the dog line on Veronica Hardy here. I think that she could just mix things all together better. I could see her outlanding Horth, and I could see her slipping in some takedowns where Hardy could potentially get into trouble. Maybe if Horth really uses that size advantage and continues to refine her grappling and kind of lean and hang on Hardy a bit and just kind of make this ugly, maybe Hardy could run into some trouble here. Maybe we're overvaluing that return performance that Hardy just had against Juliana Miller, as I said, but the value is on Hardy. I feel more comfortable siding with Hardy here. Now, I'm leaning towards a decision victory for her, but do not be surprised if she pulls off a sub. She has some tricky submission skills. You've seen her pull off some subs back in the day as well. Has a nasty little arm bar. She could pull off a variety of subs, potentially, if Horth is slipping down on the mat. But I will lean decision. Over to the welterweight division, where we have Wellington Turman taking on Jared Gooden. Jared Gooden, a very game fighter, in my opinion. He hasn't even cracked 30 years old, and he already has 31 professional fights. He's the type of fighter that's always waiting in the shadows for any opportunities that the UFC has. He'll jump in on short notice. He'll fight some of the best fighters in the world if the UFC gives him the opportunity to. Now, I do think he's lacking a little bit with his overall skill set. We saw that in his last fight against Carlston Harris, where he was controlled down to the mat for almost 10 minutes of time and a 3-round fight against Carlston Harris. If you want to give him some credit, he was game in that fight as far as not getting subbed by the talented ground game of Harris. And, he had some little moments within that fight, but he is lacking as far as his skill set goes overall when he's fighting some of the best of them. Puts in work on the regional scene, though. Bounces back and forth from the UFC to the regional scene. Gets knockouts over guys like DeMarcus Jackson. Doug Usher also gets knocked out in his own right and over there in ex-MMA against Impa Kasangane. But we all understand that Impa is a UFC caliber fighter. So taking losses to legitimate fighters, right? When you think of Carlston Harris, Impa Kasangane, losses against Randy Brown, Abubakar Nurmagomedov, and Alan Jouban. And noting, again, he took some of those fights on short notice. The lone UFC victory that he had was against Nicholas Stoles, which is a fighter that I'm not high on. But I like the fact that the UFC is giving him another opportunity here. Like I said, he's a very game fighter. I think he will be slightly outmatched here, but there are some opportunities for him to get the job done in the sense that Wellington Turman, I do think that he has a bright future ahead of him, still only 27 years old, and being one of the proteges of Glover Teixeira and Alex Pereira. You know, we talk about those guys so much. Well, remember that Turman is the young fighter under those guys, putting in work with them. But we have seen him get knocked out before. He gets a little bit reckless at times on the feet. We have seen him finished before. There is a possibility that a guy like Gooden can crack him with the shot. I think both of these guys are vulnerable to being finished. If these guys go out there and they're striking for a significant amount of time, I could see either men getting clipped with the shot, because Gooden will throw the kitchen sink at Turman's head as well as vice versa back his way. You know, some of the losses that Turman has taken, you know, in his last two losses, he went to a decision, and you could argue that he had a good amount of success against Randy Brown. That fight played out a little bit closer than some people remember. But, you know, he was knocked out against Bruno Silva and Andrew Sanchez early on in his UFC career. So, he has shown to be vulnerable at times. I think he's sharpening some of that up. He has underrated ground skills. If you remember the armbar he pulled off against Miesha Serkinov, as Serkinov came down to the middleweight division. And note, again, this is in the welterweight division, so Turman has fought up in the middleweight division. You know, he has a solid frame for the division, but Jared Gooden actually will have a 5-inch reach advantage here. That's a nice long reach advantage, but overall, I think that Turman will just be the more refined fighter. I'm very high on what Glover Teixeira and Pereira are doing over there. You got guys like, you got RoboCop. If you guys are familiar with RoboCop, I know he's training with the Black Zillions and whatnot. I know he's been bouncing up there training with Teixeira and whatnot. Talking about Gregory Rodriguez, a very talented fighter there as well. I mean, he's just he's been training with some high caliber fighters. He's only 27 years old, and I think that we're going to see Turman really come into his own over the next couple of years. I think he'll establish himself as a legitimate welterweight fighter. We may see him knocked out here or there throughout his next 4 or 5 fights, but we'll also see him have some big time finishes. He's a fighter that brings the fight, and I think he'll just be a little bit more fine-tuned than a Gooden. Gooden can struggle a little bit with his takedown defense. I could see Turman potentially getting this fight down to the mat and having success down there as well. You know, Gooden has never been submitted, so that is pretty impressive. But remember, I told you he has struggled a little bit with his takedown defense at times, and he's also struggled a little bit defensively on the feet, absorbing 6.7 strikes per minute. That's a very high number, but also putting a good amount of output out there at 4.73. But also, you look at the ratio; that's a negative ratio there. You know, Turman has a negative ratio as well, landing 3 compared to absorbing 3.87. But Turman has shown to be a little bit more calculated. Give me Wellington Turman here. And we'll take a look at the betting line, where Turman opened up as a -202 on Jazz Sports. He's now a -194. So slight action going towards Gooden's way. And I'm in agreement with that line movement, just because I don't think that this is a fight where Turman should be a 2-1 favorite, because Gooden can crack. He's a game fighter. He brings the fight, and that will open up opportunities for some wildness to happen in this fight. And again, we've seen Turman get knocked out before. We've seen Turman just be you know, a little green at times, but as I said, only 27 years old. You're going to see those things sharpen up when he's, you know, being cornered and trained by guys like Glover Teixeira, etc. So give me Wellington Turman here. Not crazy about the value on the line, but if you're targeting Turman, you can sit on this line and see if it creeps down to the -165, 170 range. Keep an eye on that line. We have a good week ahead of us for line movement to take place, but I wouldn't be targeting him at a very high line here. And this is a fight. It's hard to call how this fight's going to go. I think there's a lot of variables. I could see either men getting knocked out. Potentially they slug it out, goes to a decision. This is a very hard fight to call as far as the method, but I will edge Wellington Turman to just be a little bit more refined and a little bit sharper. That takes Gooden to 1-5 in the UFC. Not sure if he gets another opportunity after this one, so he better make this one count. So as we just talked about Glover Teixeira and Pereira and those guys having some of these young fighters being groomed under them over there, Rodolfo Bellato is a fighter you can add to that list at just 27 years old, coming off a huge victory on Dana White's Contender Series just a couple weeks ago. Came into that main event match there on that Tuesday night as the underdog, got the finish, and looked very, very good, right? He's a fighter that has taken 2 losses, but both to the same guy. A fighter that we are understanding is has a very high ceiling in Vitor Petrino. Vitor Petrino is an absolute stud. So his only 2 losses were against Vitor Petrino. So no real shame in those losses and being knocked out in both of them. But Petrino has dynamite in his hands. Bellato is showing to be a very complete and dangerous fighter. And now he takes on Ihor Potieria, a fighter that came off Dana White's Contender Series a while back. Obviously had a little bit of a layoff with the whole situation in his home country. And still 27 years old. I know he's trained over at American Top Team for some time. And he's a fighter. He looked very good on his fight on DWCS, but then when you take a look at some of his more recent fights, I really haven't been too high on those performances. Got starched by Nikolai Negamariano, looked out to be outclassed there. He dominated Shogun Hua, but Shogun was so past his prime in that fight, and it was like he was beating up on an old man. Then he gets knocked out against Carlos Olberg. I feel that, I don't want to say the book is out on him, but I think that he's a fighter he has a good frame. He's an athletic fighter, but I don't think that his skill set is that refined. And then on the other hand, you got a fighter in Rodolfo Bellato that is a very, very refined fighter. I think Bellato's going to have the edge down on the mat. I could see Bellato finishing him on the feet very easily. Look at these 2 men to his right. All right, you take a look at these 2 guys here, and then don't overlook this guy on the left over here. That's a world-class kickboxer. If you guys are familiar with him, another guy that's training over there with Glover. You remember I think he just took a loss, if I remember correctly, on Dana White's Contender Series, but a fighter that you still want to keep an eye on, the huge kickboxer that is coming over to the MMA world, and Yusri Belgori, if you remember him. But anyways, back to this fight here. I think you guys know which way I'm going with my selection here. I am on Rodolfo Bellato. I think he's just sharper anywhere this fight goes. He'll have almost a 3-inch reach advantage. He'll be about almost an inch taller, about a half inch taller. He has the natural size advantage. He's sharper anywhere this fight goes. And he's been knocked out twice. Does Ihor Potieria have the potential to clip him on the feet? Not really seeing it. His striking is not the sharpest. Another thing you want to note, I know you take a look at this record here, 20-4. It looks quite impressive, but a very padded record early on in his career. So, he's really just getting his feet wet, fighting legitimate talent. And Bellato is a fighter that has just been, really grinding in the fight game, fighting high-level fighters and whatnot. I think he'll be the more polished fighter here. He's the more polished 27-year-old fighter. Let's go take a look at the betting line, see what we're talking about here. Take a look at this. Bellato is a big-time favorite, where he is as high as a minus 457 right now. He's closing in on being a 5-1 favorite here. That's some big stuff there. That's a pretty big favorite in a spot like this. So people really showing what they think of Ihor Potieria. They think that he's a paper tiger. They think he's a little bit of a fraud here. I'm in agreement. And you take note, this is a light heavyweight matchup. And as I mentioned, Bellato has been knocked out before. Got to be careful with these heavier fighters. It takes one shot, you get clipped, you get put out. Do you want to touch almost 5-1 odds on that? I'll say it like this. I think that Bellato gets a finish in this fight. I could see this fight touching the mat. Maybe he pulls off a sub, but I'm leaning more towards maybe a TKO type of finish for Bellato. But he'll be a step ahead. I like Rodolfo Bellato. Think he has a promising UFC career ahead of him. Mel Costa taking on Steve Garcia in the featherweight division. Steve Garcia, I've been a little harsh on him at times, as you guys know. I faded him before. I had an underdog play on Hayasar Mahashate, which was a nice hit that night, if you guys remember. Mahashate came through with the first round knockout there. But you know what? I'll say this, as I'm breaking down tape on Steve Garcia and really just analyzing him, maybe I've been a little bit harsh on him. He had a big-time knockout against Chase Hooper, even though you guys know I feel Chase Hooper is vulnerable defensively, especially on the feet. Steve Garcia taking advantage of that. Then he had another knockout over Shailin Nurden-Beck. So he's on a 2-fight winning streak coming into this fight. Has victories even back in the day over guys like Chippy Mariscal, who has proven to be a legitimate fighter. He's battled guys like Ricky Tercios, Joe Warren. If you guys remember Joe Warren back in the day, Alan Cruz. I mean, these are respectable names, right? If you take a look at any of his losses, right? Violent Bob Ross, these are all respectable names. There's no real question mark losses on his resume. He's a tough fighter. He has a wrestling background, has some heavy hands, fighting out of the southpaw stance, as is Costa. So we have two southpaws clashing here. So I just want to say, maybe I've been a little bit harsh on Steve Garcia, but I am. I don't want to say I'm fading him. I'm going against him here, though. Once again, Mel Costa, in my opinion, will be quicker with his striking. He'll be more fluid with his striking. I've liked what I've seen from Costa. I know that he's coming off a recent loss. He did have a victory in his last fight, but before that, I believe he had a loss. But against the very talented Thiago Moises, the very underrated Thiago Moises, bounced back with the victory over Austin Lingo. Austin Lingo's an underrated fighter, a tough fighter, a fighter that has some good boxing, and Costa showed to be the much more diverse fighter in that fight there. I think that Costa can show to be much more diverse with his striking, as Garcia's maybe favoring his boxing a little bit more. So I really like the kicks of Costa, as you see him doing some pad work here. He's wild on the feet, man. Maybe I shouldn't say wild. That's not a good way to describe it. He's talented, he's tricky, he's wiry, but he's technical at the same time. I like what I've seen from him. Has good jiu-jitsu as well. And Steve Garcia, sometimes defensively, in striking range, he's a little bit vulnerable. I could see Costa potentially clipping him with the shot. I could potentially see that. But Costa is a very diverse finisher. 5 submissions, 4 knockouts. Almost half of his victories coming by way of finish from a variety of ways. Also has shown to be able to go to a decision. Just 27 years old, so he's very young. So you're going to see him elevate his game more so coming into this fight compared to a Steve Garcia, who's really at his prime, but he's kind of, I think we're going to see that same old Steve Garcia, and I think he'll be a little bit of a step behind Costa. I think Costa will be quicker and more fluid with his movement. I like Mel Costa in this spot here. Garcia will have a 2-inch reach advantage. He's 2 inches taller. He will be a little bit larger than Costa, but I think the speed and the fluidity of Costa will be a step ahead of Garcia's here. So once again, I go against Steve Garcia. If he's ever tuning into the show, he definitely thinks I'm a major hater on him, and it's nothing personal here, but Steve Garcia, just a little bit of cheap meat and potatoes, right? I'm not talking about filet mignon. I'm not talking about ribeyes, New York strips. I'm talking about that stew meat from Walmart that's like 3-4 days old, and you're getting that little yellow clearance sticker on it. A little bit of that type of meat with some cheap potatoes baked up on the side. So I'm not really feeling that. Let's take a look at the betting line, where you're going to see that Steve Garcia is a pretty hefty dog here. Costa's coming in just over a 2-1 favorite on my bookie. He's a -210. No movement on that line as of now. Let's take a look at Jazz Sports, where we will be able to see some movement. Costa opened up as a -186, and we see movement going his way. He's dipping to that -211 over a 2-1 favorite right now. So you see, the masses are in agreement with me right now. We see the movement going towards Costa's way. I think when you break down tape on these two fighters, I think you'll like the movement and just the overall skill set of Costa more so. Let's take a look at something here. Out of Costa's 6 losses in 26 fights, he's only been knocked out once. That's something to keep an eye on, because I think that if there's an avenue for Garcia to get the job done here, I think that if this is somewhat of a slugfest, Garcia could potentially clip Costa. Overall, though, Costa's shown to be pretty durable and pretty savvy defensively. Give me Mel Costa. I could potentially see him getting the finish with his strikes. Maybe we see a nice kick land, or he sets something up with his hands based off his kicks. But I could potentially see a finish for Costa in the first or second round. I could see these guys clashing early. We'll see how that fight goes. But give me Mel Costa to get the job done. In the lightweight division, we got Joe Solecki taking on Drakkar Klose. Drakkar Klose, the husband of Courtney Casey, former, or I don't know, current UFC fighter. I haven't seen her in some time. I think that she's been pregnant or whatnot, but a fighter that I've always been a fan of. She brings in a very entertaining fighting style, does Courtney Casey. Now, I'm not really sure if the same could be said about Drakkar Klose. I think he's a very talented and savvy fighter, likes to work the clinching very heavily into his game plan, likes to work those calf kicks and clinch up and kind of bully fighters against the cage. And stylistically, I actually feel that this is a good matchup here for him against Joe Solecki. So Joe Solecki, a fighter that really favors using his jiu-jitsu, right? I mean, that's his bread and butter, man. He gets the back of these guys, sinks in those rear naked chokes and whatnot. He's a very high caliber BJJ practitioner. Drakkar Klose is a fighter that's never been submitted as a pro. Okay, so Drakkar Klose is not an easy fighter to get down to the mat as well. And although Joe Solecki's been working on his striking, it's not that high level, to say the least. And I could see Klose working in those calf kicks and kind of getting the better of the striking exchanges there against Solecki. So that's something that's going for Klose in this matchup. When you're talking Joe Solecki, you circle back to that Jared Gooden fight, and that was a fight. It did play out closely, But you saw when Solecki was facing against a fighter that had some defensive skills to match up against what he does good, that he struggled a little bit, right? And then also, the victories that Solecki has had in the cage, I haven't been extremely high on some of those victories. I mean, Austin Hubert and Jim Miller, decent victories. Not so high in his recent victories, though. Carl Deaton III and Alex da Silva. He doesn't have a lot of big victories throughout his career. He was knocked out against Nicholas Mota, fighter that we just saw get away with murder in the cage due to the referee making that mistake there, but a fighter that was definitely on his way to taking an L. And, we picked the dog correctly against Mota there. But again, taking out old veterans like Matt Wyman, Da Silva, Deaton. I'm not high on Joe Solecki's resume. I think that Drakkar Klose is a step above those types of fighters, and I think that Drakkar Klose is going to be savvy in this matchup, and I think he's going to avoid getting submitted by Solecki. Out of Solecki's 13 victories, 8 of those victories coming by way of submission. He relies heavily on getting that submission in his fights. Drakkar Klose has never been subbed. Klose, when he goes to a decision, he has shown that he is very likely to get his hand raised. Okay, a lot of decision victories coming his way. At times, he's also showcased when he opens up, he does have fight-ending ability. I mean, there's a potential for him to land a big shot on Solecki. As we mentioned, Solecki has been finished before on the feet, but I favor Klose being crafty here, avoiding getting his back taken, and just being a step ahead of Solecki here. So nothing but respect towards Solecki. A good dude, a very solid dude. Chatted it up with him for about an hour. But again, when I break down the tape, I see this fight going Klose's way. And also, just note real quick, I want to go through some of Klose's recent victories. The Rafa Garcia victory is a big one. Rafa Garcia is a very underrated fighter, a very dangerous guy. Victories over Christos Giagos, Bobby Green, Lando Venata, Mark Diakese. Okay, there's respectable victories on his resume. The loss against Beneil Dariush. Remember, he almost finished Beneil Dariush before he got clipped with the shot, but he had success in that fight as well, showing that he can go toe-to-toe with some of the best fighters in the world. I need to see more from Solecki before I'm willing to get back on his side. He's a fighter that reminds me a lot of a fighter that we will be talking about a little bit later in this card, which is Sean Brady, a fighter that just has high caliber BJJ but needs to really fine-tune his overall arsenal. So let's go take a look at the betting line to see what we're talking about here. Drakkar Klose is a -130 on my bookie. No movement as of right now. Let's see what kind of movement we're seeing over in Jazz Sports. Drakkar Klose opened as a -115. This fight was a pick'em. Action coming in on Drakkar Klose. So once again, the line movement in agreement for what I'm seeing as well. I thought that Klose should be a slight favorite here. I wasn't really in agreement with the pick'em line here. I see more of an edge towards Klose's way. I like Drakkar Klose to win a decision victory here, working in those calf kicks, working in the boxing a little bit, but being very sharp with his takedown defense and just his grappling defense, not letting his back get taken and whatnot, and outpointing Joe Solecki here. Cody Brundage. Let me not go too much in on him here. I think you guys know where I stand on Brundage, as he spoiled a major parlay for me in his last fight, as he was on his way to being finished by Jacob Malkoun. Yes, Jacob Malkoun did hit him with some illegal elbows, but Brundage definitely could have continued, and he took the weasel way out. I do believe that the UFC is looking to get this flea off their back here. I think that they're looking for him to get finished here, set up Zachary Reese for the future. I think that they see him as a promising up-and-coming fighter and a great addition to the division, and they're just tired of Brundage. Brundage is a flake of a fighter. Let us not forget the performance that he had against Cedricus Dumas. Atrocious. I don't want to go too much into it. I think you guys know where I stand and how he looked in those fights. And this dude, Zachary Reese, is a fight finisher, 6-0, all by way of finish, 4 knockouts, 2 subs. He's a diverse fighter. Crazy frame for the division. Looked great on Dana White's Contender Series. Went in there, got the finish in that spot, got the submission victory. And look at the frame on him here, as you see him training with guys like Andre Petrosky, which, take into consideration, Andre Petrosky, a fighter that's fought in the UFC's middleweight division as well. So, I mean, look at the frame on him here. I really believe he has the potential to be a really solid addition to this division. I think that you keep an eye on him. 29 years old. He's not a spring chicken, but hasn't cracked 30 yet. And he will have a 5-inch reach advantage here. He's 4 inches taller. Cody Brundage does not like to engage in a legitimate scrap in a fight, and Zachary Reese is going to bring that type of fight. I think that Cody Brundage gets broken. I don't see Cody Brundage leaving the second round in this fight. I don't. I think it's the last we see of Brundage. The UFC is just looking to figure out, get rid of that contract and get him off the roster. I truly believe that. We take a look at the betting line. Zachary Reese opened as a minus 291. And we see the line dipping a little bit back and forth. I'm interested to see anybody even targeting Brundage, even with that so-called value there, because he's going to get broken in this fight. I believe that. Brundage does have a knockout victory over Tresean Gore. If you want me to note that real quick, Tresean Gore almost went to the hospital the day before that fight. You guys remember I talked to his management team and whatnot. And, I'll give Brundage some credit for that shot, but we haven't seen anything impressive from him. He has that collegiate wrestling background, never seems to know how to use it in an MMA fight, and he's a flake of a fighter. Even if you want to date back to his first fight on Dana White's Contender Series against William Knight, where he gets a takedown and then he's mounting William Knight, and then William Knight grabs his wrist, double grip baseball bat style, as he's flattened out and flips Cody Brundage over his head and finishes him up there. So he's a flake of a fighter. Zach Reese is a finisher. He's going to get a finish here. I think if you're targeting Reese, maybe you're looking for more of an inside the distance type of play. I could see it being a sub or a TKO or a knockout, however you want to spin that. And it's a little bit of a high line, yes, for a guy that's 6-0 making his UFC debut, but he gets the job done here. And potentially it's a parlay piece, even as high as the line is, in my opinion. Keep an eye on it. Maybe it dips back down a little bit more so, and it's a solid piece if you can grab it at like 250, 260. Interestingly enough, we're talking two top 15 ranked bantamweight fighters over on the women's side of things. Julia Avila has been very inactive. From what I see, she just had a baby recently, so that's obviously why she stepped away from the fight game. So respect to her for doing that. It's not like she's a fighter that was dabbling with retirement or whatnot. I think that she just took some time away to start up a family, so nothing but respect towards her way. She's a fighter that was really highly touted a while back. She's had some big victories in the cage. Miesha Tate, I don't think I need to go on too much about her. You guys all know about Miesha Tate. She's got this desire to make this return and make a run in the UFC late in her career at 37 years old now. I think it's very clear that she's not making a run at the title, but at this stage, I think that she's just trying to get one more or two more legitimate UFC victories. Now, she has the name where if she gets a couple victories, she could all of a sudden be making some noise. But understand, when you're breaking on tape on her, she's not going to be keeping up with the best fighters in this division. She got beat up by Ketlin Vieira. She was all bloodied up. She couldn't even get a W against Lauren Murphy. We talked earlier about cheap meat and potatoes. She did have a victory over Marion Renaud, and that was in her return fight after a very long layoff, after a 5-year layoff. Marion Renaud, going into that fight, she was creeping up on grandma status, quite legitimately, old enough to be a grandma. I think she might have a grandchild. So, not too much respect on that W, for being honest. So, Miesha Tate has good boxing, has some wrestling skills. If you want to try to point at an avenue for her to have success in this fight, it is based on the fact that Avila is coming off such a long layoff. If you want to bring up the lone loss, I believe, in Julia Avila's UFC career, it was against Sijara Eubanks, where Sijara Eubanks had a lot of success getting the fight down to the mat. She was a 3 of 7 on takedowns, but had over 10 minutes of control time. Okay, landing 107 total strikes on Avila. She had a lot of success in that fight. Sijara Eubanks, you could argue, has a similar fighting style to Miesha Tate. So maybe if Miesha Tate can mix things up, get this fight down to the mat, maybe she can have some success here. As much as I would like to see Miesha Tate get the job done here, I am a big fan of hers. I'm siding with Julia Avila here. She is shown to have some big power. She's a little stiff with her striking, but shows to have big power. If you remember the knees that she landed on Gina Mazzani, finishing her up quickly, has respectable victories over fighters like Pani Kianzad. That is a fighter that is a high caliber fighter, in my opinion. Even has a victory over Marion Renaud back when 2012, when Marion Renaud was just like 40 years old, way back then, not in her 50s. So, I think that Julia Avila is going to make her return here, and I think that she's going to have some success. Unfortunately, I think that Miesha Tate will be bloodied up. I think she will be landed on. I think that she'll be very tough, and she'll continue to march forward. But Julia Avila is a well-rounded fighter that has some good power. I could see her landing some heavy shots in the clinch, and I am siding with Julia Avila having success in her return fight. So her last fight was in 2021. Almost a 2-year layoff, and that was a submission victory over Storlienko, who is talented down in the mat as well. So just note that Avila is shown to be well-rounded with her offense at times, right? Landing big shots in the clinch, finishing fighters there, submitting good fighters, fighters that are competent down in the mat. Give me Julia Avila to get her hand raised, and this may be the retirement fight for Miesha Tate. If she's bloodied up, takes another L here, I think that it might be the end of the road. Maybe the UFC has a talk with her. Let's take a look at the betting line, where we will see Julia Avila is a minus 146 on Jazz Sports, open as a minus 172. Action trending towards Miesha Tate's way. Maybe people like the fact that Miesha Tate's been more active with Avila coming off a long layoff. Maybe people are watching a lot of that Eubanks tape and seeing that Tate maybe can go down that avenue, maybe have some success. The more I break down tape on these fighters' recent fights, I just see Avila bloodying up Tate. Unfortunately, that's what I see. And Tate's very tough, very durable. I could see her surviving, but it's going to be hard for me to see her getting that decision victory with her being landed on and being bloodied up. You take a look at what these fighters have done in the octagon. Avila landing 3.18 strikes per minute while only absorbing 2.86. She's been very sound defensively. Somehow Miesha Tate only absorbing 3.1 strikes. I was very shocked to see that number while only landing 2.61. But, the ratio there is lopsided while Avila is on the positive side with her ratio. That's one thing you might want to note. I think Avila gets the job done. And I'm going to lean a decision victory for Julia Avila. And again, I think Miesha Tate will be bloodied up once again with black eyes after the fight. She just seems to be tagged a lot in her fights. So at 41 years old, Clay Guida refuses to step away from the fight game. Always a game opponent. I have so many funny stories or things I could talk about when we're talking about Clay Guida. The most exciting fight I've ever witnessed, which I mentioned here before, in the middle of Jackson County. Don't ask me what I was doing there, but spending a night or two in the county jail, and we were able to pull up his fight against Diego Sanchez. So it was live on Spike TV that night in the pod, jumping up on the tables, betting our milks and whatnot. I've mentioned that story. That was definitely the wildest fight that I've ever witnessed in person or on TV. That was just a crazy night. Bumped into Clay Guida at an event one time over in Orlando, and he was on the phone, and I guess he didn't like the fact that I pulled out my phone, caught him on the side, was just doing a little picture with him. I was trying to get his attention. Maybe I was a little rude, but he gave me a little snarl and a dirty little mumble, and I thought he was a dick. And then I ended up meeting him at a BKFC event, which I've mentioned here, and he was sitting right next to me, him and his whole crew, me and my boys, and I was drunk, having a good time, and I mentioned how he kind of did me dirty that one time, and he started joking about it, and little did I know, man, Clay Guida is one of the coolest guys I've ever met in the fight game, and next thing you know, me and Clay Guida are running over to the bar in the arena there in Miami, and we're doing shots together, and just chopping it up there for literally about 40 minutes, chilling, walking around the arena, going back to our seats, bottom a shot or two, bottom a beer, not a big deal there. And I will say this, he was very quick to accept my drinks. He was basically letting me know, he was like a hot date, he's letting me know that the drinks were on me. But all in all, he was really a cool dude and exactly the opposite of what I thought before I bumped into him that night. And big tip of the hat and respect to Clay Guida for all the work he's put in. And, I find this interesting. I thought as his career went on, if he wanted to hang around, I thought he was a fighter that we would really see start to get knocked out a lot and take some damaging blows in the feet. But if you take a look at all his recent losses, lost to Rafa Garcia via decision, snuck out a decision victory against Scott Holtzman. That was debatable. I was there for that event. He was submitted by Claudio Puelles, but all these other knockouts, all these other losses via decision losses to Madsen, close fight, Bobby Green, Jim Miller, he was submitted. Now there's some submission losses going on here, but you got to go all the way back to the Brian Ortega TKO loss back in 2016. The reason why I'm noting that is because the bread and butter of Joaquim Silva, what he's been doing in the cage. He lands damaging shots on the feet. And although Guida has been surviving in these fights or not being finished via strikes, I think that Father Time's going to catch up with him. And I think that we could see a knockout loss here. You know, Guida does have great footwork and he's always active. He's tough. He could take a shot. But Silva is a fighter that, even though he has, he's been known and people talk about his BJJ skills, his nickname Neto BJJ, without a doubt, he is a striker. All right, coming off his recent victories are, a TKO finish over Jesse Ronson, finished Jared Gordon, looked like a buzzsaw in that fight against Gordon, and Gordon's a very durable fighter. There's not a lot of notable submission victories on his resume. All right, hasn't been the most active fighter. You take a look at some of the work he's been putting in. 6 knockout victories, half of his victories coming by way of KO, TKO, only 1 submission victory. So I don't know if he's going to catch Guida with that sub, even though Guida's been vulnerable to being subbed. I think even as durable as Guida has been, I could see Father Time catching up to Guida, and I think maybe he gets hurt and gets finished. I don't know. Silva is dangerous there. I am edging Silva in this spot here. Both men, about the same reach, almost the same height, not a lot going on there, but Silva 7 years younger. When you take a look at statistically fighters that are fighting in their 40s against guys, that much younger, 7 years younger, you could argue 34, still somewhat of a prime age. It's getting up there, but he's not over the hump. There's just statistically a lot of stuff pointing towards Silva getting the job done here, and that's the angle that I'm going. I got Silva winning this fight, and I think he could land a big shot here. I think that if they clash, I could potentially see him landing a big shot. Maybe it goes down to the mat after he lands it. Maybe he gets that rare submission victory. But I do potentially see Silva getting a finish in this spot, even though Guida has shown to be durable. He's 41 years old. Silva is a minus 202 favorite. He opened up as a minus 219. The line kind of trending towards Guida's way, very slightly. Give me Joaquim Silva to get the job done here. Maybe if we're lucky, this line continues to trend towards Guida's way. If you can grab Silva around a minus 185 line, I think that would be a bargain of a line. Maybe you don't want to play around too much with the specific target of finish because there's some weird moving parts here. But I will take Joaquim Silva via TKO. We got a barn burner here in the light heavyweight division. Khalil Rountree, the very savvy striker, taking on Azamat Mirzakhanov, a very dangerous striker also. I mean, these guys are definitely set to clash here. Azamat Mirzakhanov, you guys know he does suffer from Pluto from Popeye syndrome. Other fighters that have known to be diagnosed with that, Blagoy Ivanov and etc. Other fighters in the cage that have had a lot of success in the octagon, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. Azamat has some nasty power. I got to bring up his UFC debut where I had some big money tied up with him against Tafon and Chukwi, and he was down on the scorecards before landing that flying knee at the beginning of the 3rd round. So showing some diversity with his striking, knocked out Devin Clark. He's shown to have big power in his hands, coming off a legitimate victory over Dustin Jacoby, I would say. Whereas on the other hand, Khalil Rountree, he had a recent victory over Dustin Jacoby. I consider that to be a robbery. That fight, I consider that legitimately in the robbery section there. I think that was a bad decision. Jacoby should have got the nod there. But other than that, he just had a finish over Chris Daukaus. Daukaus is a fighter that's been being finished by everybody, so he was kind of set up on a platter there. Finished Carl Robertson, who's not been looking that good either. I want to give him some credit here, but finished Modestas Bukauskas with that tricky little leg kick where he hyperextended his leg. Give him credit there, but let us not forget he lost to Marcin Prachnio back in early 2021. That's not to be forgiven. Got finished by Ian Cutelaba, got finished by Johnny Walker, so he's been prone to being finished by some of those power type strikers, even though he's a very dangerous striker in his own right. Azamat Mirzakhanov has shown to be very durable. Khalil Rountree may be piecing him apart and whatnot, but one big shot lands by Pluto from Popeye, and we could easily see Rountree's lights get cut off. We've seen him have a short fuse where he'll just kind of shut off at times. Again, talking about that Johnny Walker finish, that was a nasty one where Walker went out there and finished Rountree. But that all being said, Rountree's Muay Thai is it's beautiful to watch. He's an amazing striker, and I could easily see him getting the better of some of these striking exchanges. But I could see Azamat just shaking things up with one big shot. And Azamat is a well-rounded fighter as well. I think there's some X factors that he may bring into the cage here overall as scrambles and certain things mix up. I think that he's an absolute prime fighter right now at the age that he's at. I think that he is in his prime. He's been looking to be in the best shape that we've ever seen him as he steps into the cage. He's landing almost 1 strike per minute more than Rountree. He's been a little bit more offensive, a little bit more active offensively. He's been more technically sound defensively, only absorbing about 1 strike less. He has a much better ratio than Rountree. When it comes to the grappling, his takedown defense has been very good. Not that that's going to matter here because Rountree's going to want to keep this fight standing. And Azamat has shown to be willing to exchange. I do think this fight will take place in the feet for the most part, but if there is an edge, maybe Azamat sneaks in a takedown. But I will say that they strike it out, and the power and the footwork, the underrated footwork of Mirzakhanov will come into play. And I will take Azamat Mirzakhanov to get the job done, and I could easily see a finish come his way. There's some serious power there. Now, he opened up as a -148 favorite, and we saw the line go towards Rountree's way, touch -140, and then it dips back to a -150. So people kind of coming back the other way now. So it'll be interesting to see which way this line continues to move. This is a great fight. And although I'm picking Azamat, let me be very clear. Khalil Rountree is a dangerous fighter. He's a very tricky fighter who will have a 5-inch reach advantage on the feet. He's 3 inches taller. He will be more rangy. If he could avoid the dangerous shots, the big shots from Mirzakhanov, he can maybe be able to outpoint Mirzakhanov. But Mirzakhanov, like I said, has great footwork, and he has been known to close the distance and land and find that big shot. And I think these guys clash here. This is a great fight. The winner of this really looks to make some noise in the division. Give me Azamat Mirzakhanov to get his hand raised. Punahele Seriano taking on Dustin Stoltzfus. Fight taking place in the middleweight division. Punahele Seriano, somewhat of a fan favorite type of fighter in the sense that he goes out there early on, looks to land those big, heavy shots with his hands, and looks to knock out his opponent. 9 victories, 6 of them coming by way of knockout. Okay, that's what he likes to do. And it's worth noting that Dustin Stoltzfus, even though he's been taking a lot of L's, he's just coming off his first ever knockout loss. Okay, so out of 19 professional fights, he's only been knocked out once. That could be a recipe for some turbulence for Seriano, because if he doesn't land that knockout early on, we know that Seriano has had a problem with his cardio. And in fact, I would say out of all the fighters in the UFC roster, even though he does so many things well, he has some of the worst cardio in the game. And that's due a little bit to the activity that he'll put out there early on in his fighting style. But that's a problem when you have money on him and then he's gassed out going into the latter of second round and going into the third round. That's a problem, especially for a fighter like Stoltzfus, who, although he doesn't do many things well, I'm not so high on him offensively with his striking and whatnot. He is a fighter that comes in pretty good shape, has some grappling skills and whatnot. So there is a little bit of a recipe for disaster there when you take a look at that. All in all, though, the fact that Stoltzfus is coming off that tough knockout loss where he was just finished by Abus Magomedov, I can see Seriano doing something very similar to what Abus did in that fight with the heavy offense attack early on in this fight and having success there. Stoltzfus had a solid victory against Dwight Grant in a fight that where the pace was pushed very, very much so. Again, pointing towards that direction. If this fight goes later, I could see Stoltzfus having success. And the red flag on Seriano's record, if you want to look through it, and his short MMA or short UFC career, yes, he just got finished by Roman Kopylov, but Roman Kopylov is finishing everybody. He's the dark horse of the division. Before that, he had a knockout victory. Brendan Allen is working his way into fighting for the belt. One more victory for him. If you guys check out my recent Instagram post, just did a post about that. But the red flag here is the Nicholas Maximov fight. That was a fight where he gassed out, and Nick Maximov has not been looking that good. That was a red flag fight for him there. But again, when you look at the Kopylov and Allen losses, they don't look that bad these days. As I mentioned, there is a recipe for some turbulence for Seriano, but all in all, I do believe this is a little bit of a layup fight for Seriano. I believe the UFC likes his aggressive style. He's continuously been working over at Extreme Couture with Eric Nixick, and he should look to be even sharper and sharper. The cardio should be refined a little bit more, so he should be working on all aspects of his game. Only 30 years old. Dustin Stoltzfus, very stiff. He snuck that victory off Joseph Pfeiffer with that little wizard and that judo situation there where Stoltzfus injured himself. Excuse me, where Pfeiffer injured himself, but that was a little bit of a fluke. And Stoltzfus, he was probably not a UFC caliber fighter. Where on the other hand, Seriano, if he refines some things, he does have. He has some offensive traits in his arsenal that, like, he is a UFC caliber fighter. So give me Punahele Seriano to land some big shots. Is he going to get Stoltzfus out of there? I think it's realistic. I know I've been targeting a lot of finishes on this card. If that all happens, it'll be a very fun card. I'm going to say Seriano might get that knockout, but don't be surprised if Stoltzfus survives. But even if Stoltzfus survives, I don't think he takes over this fight late enough to get the job done. I think we see Seriano working on his cardio, his conditioning and whatnot, and I think that he still hangs in there tough and gets his hand raised, even via decision. So he's a big favorite. He opened up almost as a 3-1 favorite. Line slowly going towards Stoltzfus' way. People maybe just seeing some value on Stoltzfus based on the cardio concerns. And I wouldn't have a problem if you guys want to target Dustin Stoltzfus. I wouldn't have a problem with you guys doing that. I don't think that's necessarily a bad move. If you're catching him at a plus 233 line, plus 227 line, if you think he can weather the storm early on and do something similar to what Nick Maximov did, and you're getting that type of value on the line, I wouldn't have a problem with you doing that. Comment below if you're targeting that. I'm not saying I'll be doing that, but there is an avenue of success for Stoltzfus here. So Sean Brady looks to make a return to the octagon coming off a very disappointing loss. He had a lot of hype behind him going into that Belal Muhammad fight. He gets finished in the second round by Muhammad. Muhammad doesn't finish anybody. So the fact that he was finished in that way, it obviously did not look good. Sean Brady, you check out some of his more recent interviews, and he has completely brushed off that loss. He seems like he's ready to go. He seems like he's a pretty mentally tough dude. He thinks it was just a slip on a banana peel type situation. Now, Kelvin Gastelum is coming off a victory against Chris Curtis. It looked pretty good in that fight. Kelvin Gastelum, a fighter that has a lot of ups and downs. It's hard to really grasp what type of Kelvin is coming to the table. We've seen him go into the cage and have mental miscues like against Jack Hermanson where he just gets subbed in seconds. But when he is mentally there, he's a very dangerous fighter. He's a very well-rounded fighter. And all signs are pointing towards him being ready to go for this fight. Training over at Team Fight Ready over in Scottsdale, Arizona. Fun fact, the teller drove out to Arizona and lived out there for a couple months once back in the day. Actually lived in Scottsdale. Whatever you want to call it. Arizona's weird. It's like you got Tempe, Arizona, but I lived in Phoenix, Tempe, Scottsdale. It was like all the same thing. It's like all on top of each other. But you guys know that Team Fight Ready has been really having success in the cage as of recently, led by Henry Cejudo. You got Davison Figueredo over there. We'll be talking about him in a little bit, and I'm sure you guys just hated the way I pronounced his name, but you guys got to deal with that because I like to call him Figueredo, whatever you want to call him. But he will be making his bantamweight debut in the octagon, and a phenomenal fighter, ex-champ. And I just think that when you take a look at this picture and you see Kelvin grinding over at this gym, I think that it points towards him being that dangerous version of Gastelum. He's coming into this fight off the victory we just mentioned. I think that he has all the potential in the world to be a stylistic nightmare for a guy like Sean Brady, who really relies on his jiu-jitsu and grappling, where Kelvin Gastelum knows how to defend takedowns. He can grapple himself, right? He's one of the more polished grapplers in the division, even though he likes to showcase his striking. And when it comes to the striking, he's going to have a major edge here. So I can easily see Kelvin Gastelum sprawling and brawling here, avoiding Brady getting to his back, avoiding Brady using that jiu-jitsu. And I don't know if Brady's going to like being teed off on by a guy like Gastelum, fighting out of that southpaw stance, throwing heavy leather. Again, we just saw Muhammad break Brady down. I don't see any reason why Gastelum can't break him down as well. Gastelum has been around the fight game forever, but he's still only 32 years old. And, when you take a look at the frames, a lot of times when you're talking Kelvin Gastelum, he's undersized, and this isn't that type of fight. Basically, both men have the same reach. Brady has a 1-inch height advantage. I think that there's just a lot of things pointing towards Gastelum having success here. I feel more comfortable siding with the crafty veteran who has shown to do his thing all throughout the years, whereas Sean Brady is just not the most proven fighter. He was undefeated going into that Muhammad fight. But a victory over an aged Michael Chiesa, who's been breaking down every time he's in there. Jake Matthews, we talked about him and the last card where you take a look at his victories. Jake Matthews has really no legitimate victories, very, very slim legitimate victories. And then before that, a victory over Ismail Nurdiov, the Austrian Wonder Boy who vanished from the fight game. Christina Aguilera, a fighter that was never UFC caliber. Court McGee, an aged Court McGee, nothing but respect towards his way. But Colton Smith, I think he was the Ultimate Fighter, fought in the finale. If you remember him, the Army Ranger dude. Gilbert Urbina, tough fighter coming out of the Ultimate Fighter, but not a lot of big victories here. Kelvin Gastelum is a huge name in the game, and I will side with Kelvin Gastelum to get the job done. And I feel like there could be another finish here, maybe a second round TKO type of finish. If there's a high pace in this fight, I could see it easily. So again, I'm throwing one of those at you. Gastelum opened as a plus 104 dog. He's now a minus 111. I'd almost pick 'em odds, essentially the line closing in at pick 'em odds. And you guys got to comment below and tell me what you're seeing here. What do you see in Sean Brady that makes you guys feel good with him in this spot? Maybe he's a little younger. He's hungry coming off the loss, has those sharp jiu-jitsu skills. I think Gastelum can defend them and could have success on the feet. And give me Kelvin Gastelum to get a finish here. If the pace is high, I think Gastelum finds a way to break him late in this fight or towards the mid rounds. And I see him defending the jiu-jitsu of Sean Brady. Devison Figueiredo looks to make his bantamweight debut in the octagon, taking on Rob Font, a very established bantamweight fighter that always brings the fight. You got to be a fan of the style of Rob Font's. He's so active with his striking. He's willing to go to war. This fight should be epic here. Now, Rob Font, you take a look at what he's been doing as of recently. Coming off a loss to Corey Sandhagen, he was dominated down on the mat, but showed his durability and toughness once again. Had a knockout victory over Adrian Yanez before that, landing some nice and clean shots with his hands. And then, before that, I want to talk about the Marlon Chito Vera fight. That was a fight where Rob Font was breaking statistical records as that fight was going on, right? And then Vera continuously landed that big shot and would steal the round. But just note that Rob Font was having a lot of success throughout that five round war. Okay, just understanding what kind of threat he brings to the table offensively. I could easily see him putting the volume on Figueiredo in this matchup here where Fig will look to land a big shot and maybe drop him or hurt him. But tit for tat as the rounds go on, I think that Rob Font has a recipe here to out volume a Fig. I really do believe that. And, let's take a look at some of the statistical stats, I should say, the stats that they bring to the table, right? So look at this. Rob Font landing 5.71 strikes per minute compared to Fig's 3.09, almost doubling the amount of output while really absorbing the same amount of strikes, which is pretty interesting there as well. I think that could be a problem here. I think that this is a tough fight when you just take into consideration, Fig bumping up to the bantamweight division. Rob Font, nothing but respect towards Brandon Moreno's weight, very talented fighter. But Rob Font is a bantamweight fighter. He's a little bit more naturally large here. He'll have a 3.5 inch reach advantage. He's 3 inches taller. There is a size advantage here for Rob Font. And, I see Rob Font pushing the pace on Fig here. And I didn't like the way that Fig looked in that last fight there against Moreno as he kind of wilted in the third round and was finished. Looked very good in the fight before that. Remember, these guys fought 4 times in the third match. He looked very good in that one. A lot of ups and downs with the performances there. And Rob Font is a guy that just, what you're getting from Rob Font. He's always game. He's showing up here. I think these guys are gonna go to war on the feet. I don't know if Fig can really change levels and have success on Font the same way that Sandhagen did. Just being undersized and whatnot. And Rob does have an underrated get-up game and underrated grappling. If you saw the way he was defending Sandhagen even down on the mat, I know he was consistently taken down, but you saw the guard of him down on the mat. I mean, he's a lot sharper there than a lot of you guys think, and I don't think he could hold down Font. I don't think Fig could hold down Font like that. I think that there's a more likelihood that we see Font landing some big shots, and this is a war, and I see him outlanding Fig. Now, I'm not sure if he gets that finish. I'm kind of edging Font more at getting a decision victory here. But I like Rob Font. I like Rob Font in this spot. Opened up as a minus 182 on Jazz Sports. He's now a minus 186. Very slight movement, but the line is trending towards Font's way, which, I'd be interested to see how this line progresses. On Bovada, Rob Font opened as a minus 152. He's now a minus 175. If you guys could see that from the beginning, I know it might be a little bit cut off, but movement coming in on Rob Font, and as we see them at the weigh-ins and the stare downs, and you see Font being the larger guy and the established bantamweight fighter, I think that it'll settle in with Font being like a minus 190, minus 200 favorite potentially, unless we see Fig really looking bulked up and really filling into the bantamweight division. He's up there in age, and I do think it was the right move for him. I think that the weight cut was getting to him, and maybe he looks good in this division, but I got to see it first. I know what I'm getting from Font in this division, and he will be very active. Gimme Rob Font to get the unanimous decision victory here. What a fight this is going to be in the lightweight division. Two OGs in the game. Dan Hooker taking on Bobby Green. Both fighters having some recent success as well. Dan Hooker, with the much needed rebound late in his career. He was coming off a couple losses, taking a lot of damage. When you think back to the Arnold Allen knockout loss, getting submitted by Islam Makhachev, which Bobby Green did as well, getting knocked out against Michael Chandler, going to war against Dustin Poirier, which was really a great showcase for him there, but he took so much damage. When you saw him taking all these losses, right, after the Dustin fight, essentially going into the Claudio fight, he had lost 4 of his last 5 fights. I think a lot of people were thinking the same thing I was thinking, which was that maybe Hooker was coming to the end of his career with all the damage that he had taken. Looked phenomenal against Claudio Puelles, especially late in that fight, right? Got the finish late in the second round. Then looked phenomenal against Jalen Turner, going to war, getting a victory against a fighter in Turner who was just surging right now. So, I mean, he's really hot right now is Dan Hooker. He's 33 years old and, again, looks to have this resurgence in his career. A lot of what I just said about Dan Hooker, you could say the same thing about Bobby Green, right? Bobby Green is a fighter that is now 37 years old, but is coming off some of the biggest victories in his career, of all time, right? And throughout his entire career. The knockout that he had over Grant Dawson, let me not talk about that too much. That was a weird knockout. I know some of you guys don't want to hear any of my conspiracy stories, but in all reality, right, he got that victory. Dawson was cracked, and it was weird how Dawson crumbled so easily, but we'll give Green credit for landing that shot. Submitted Tony Ferguson. I don't know about that. Take that with a grain of salt. Got the headbutt on Jared Gordon, but looked good again in that fight. But let's not forget, he was finished by Drew Dober via KO and dominated by Islam, as we mentioned earlier. But Islam is going to pretty much take out anybody in this division, so don't be too harsh on him. The Rafael Fiziev loss, he looked very good. It was a very closely contested match. Almost could have went either way. Looked great against Ali Quinta, retiring him with that finish there. So Bobby Green has been looking good. All right, just to go through the list of what he's been doing. This is a fight where I think they will definitely go tit for tat with the striking. They're gonna duke it out on the feet. Dan Hooker throws beautiful calf kicks. He's going to have a 4-inch reach advantage. He's more rangy. He's longer, but he is more than willing to exchange in a brawl, and that could be a little bit of a problem because Bobby Green has been showing that he has some power. He has that fight-ending ability. And he's slippery with his head movement, and I can see him countering Hooker, bloodying up Hooker. I think this fight's going to be an all-out war, but something tells me that Dan Hooker is going to take this fight over. Something's telling me that way, and I've been a little bit back and forth with who I was going to go with, but I'm going to edge Dan Hooker. I think that he has some good success from the outside, and I would not be surprised if he actually finishes Bobby Green as well. We'll see if someone gets a finish here, but I like being on the Dan Hooker side of things. Just my gut tells me that he's hitting on all cylinders right now. He's having a little bit of a late rebound, and I see him getting the job done here. He's a minus 160 on my bookie. On Jazz Sports, he opened as a minus 149. He's a minus 163. The action trending towards Hooker's way. I think people like that size advantage and those sharp striking skills that he possesses. And if he fights an intelligent fight, I could see him controlling this fight. But he has to be careful. If he starts to brawl it out, Bobby Green will be slipping and ripping, and you never know what's going to happen here. I cannot wait for this fight. I like Dan Hooker to win a decision in a grueling type of fight, a very fun fight. So there's major stock in this fight for the lightweight division. 2 top 8 ranked lightweight fighters. Beneil Dariush taking on Arman Tsarukyan. Once again, early on in this video, I gave my praise for Arman Tsarukyan. You guys know I'm very high on him. I think that besides the debut loss that he had against Islam Makhachev, which he was only 22 years old, he should be undefeated in the cage. He should be 8-0, and did not like the decision that went towards Gamrot's way and that main event war. And I still think it was a W for him, no matter how you spin it, showing the heart that he has, the cardio and all that. Arman Tsarukyan, extremely well-rounded, very underrated kicks. Now from Tsarukyan, he's very light on his feet, has good power. He's a great grappler. Again, you think about that match he had against Islam. That was the stiffest test we've seen Islam have, besides when he was knocked out by Adrian Martins or the first fight against Alexander Volkanovski, right? But besides that, there's not many men that have put Islam to the test like that as the 22-year-old kid, Arman Tsarukyan, taking that fight on short notice did. That's impressive, man. That's extremely impressive. And I really believe that Arman Tsarukyan has the fighting style to make a run at Islam, which that Islam is just, you take a look at the top 10, say he fights Charles Oliveira, I think that's going to go Islam's way again. We don't know that for sure. I mean, Charles is dangerous, but we've seen Islam figure that puzzle out before. Justin Gaethje has really looked good. Maybe Gaethje's a fighter that could potentially make a run at Islam, but all in all, I think that that Khabib type style, the Islam style, we've seen that against Gaethje. I could see Gaethje slipping on a banana peel. DP coming off that knockout loss, he does not want the smoke with Islam. I think Islam finishes him. There's not a lot of notable names here to talk about when we're talking about dethroning Islam Makhachev. I think that stylistically, Arman Tsarukyan is the fighter. So, let's not just completely overlook Beneil Dariush. He's a phenomenal fighter. He's coming off a sloppy loss to Charles Oliveira, where he was finished in the first round. And we've seen those types of performances by him before. We've seen him a little bit sloppy on the feet. I mean, he was almost finished by Drakkar Klose, if you remember early on in that fight, even though he eventually got the knockout over Drakkar. We talked about that fight earlier. But we've seen him a little bit sloppy on the feet. I could see the technical Tsarukyan landing some big shots and potentially breaking down Dariush here. Dariush has phenomenal grappling, but Tsarukyan can counter that with his skills there. If you want to do some fighter math, I mean, Dariush dominated Mateusz Gamrot, essentially looked phenomenal in that fight. If that version of him shows up, he could be sticky and he can give Tsarukyan some issues. But this is a 5-round main event fight. Tsarukyan will have plenty of time to show that he is the superior fighter here, in my opinion. I think he lands some good shots on the feet, and he'll have a half-inch reach advantage. Nothing really going on there, even though he's 3 inches shorter. He has a nice wingspan for his height, and I like Arman Tsarukyan to get the finish in this fight. I like him to get the finish in this fight. He has 25 minutes to do it. Beneil Dariush is coming off a questionable performance where he broke down. Again, I'll mention that Charles Oliveira fight. And he was also knocked out by Alexander Hernandez back in 2018. We've seen him hurt before, right? We talk about, some of his miscues. When he loses, he gets finished. Submitted by Michael Chiesa back in the day. Knocked out against Ramsey Nijem. If you want to see a wild fight, go pull that up. That fight, I believe it took place in the Middle East. That was one of the early events that take place towards that way. Maybe it took place in Europe, I forget, but I remember there was a lot of Middle Eastern fighters fighting on that card, and Ramsey Nijem was the dog, and he ran out there. I think he hit him with a flying knee or something wild. It looked like a street fight. The crowd was going crazy, and the crowd was in favor for Ramsey Nijem in that fight, based on if you know your history and whatnot, based on certain reasons. But so I like Arman Tsarukyan to get the job done here. I like him to get that finish. Let's go take a look at the betting odds. Arman Tsarukyan right now is a minus 204, 210 now on Jazz Sports. Opened up as a minus 181. Action coming in on Tsarukyan, which is interesting because he's already slightly over a 2-1 favorite at this point in time. And you see the action coming in on him. My bookie opened as a 2-1 favorite flat and minus 200. He's now minus 210. The line still trajecting towards his way. It's interesting, right? Because Dariush is a fighter that has been highly praised and highly respected, but that just shows you what people are thinking of Tsarukyan. Jazz Sports, Dariush opened up as a plus 147. He's now at 170. If you're on the Dariush side of things, you're just sitting on this line. And if you're on Tsarukyan, you want to jump on that. So I think Tsarukyan gets the finish, and I think that we're talking some big time fights for Tsarukyan. He'll be in the mix with fighting maybe the winner if we see a trilogy fight of DP and Gaethje. Maybe, I don't know if the UFC would go that route, but the winner of the Chandler versus McGregor, I wouldn't bank on that. You're most likely seeing the winner of McGregor and Chandler fighting for a belt after that fight, just because of the name recognition, which will put Tsarukyan kind of in a weird situation. Maybe you see the UFC giving him the winner of Dan Hooker and Bobby Green. That's a very realistic possibility as well. All right, and keep an eye on Benoit Saint Denis who's a dark horse in the division as well. I didn't talk about him that much. He's the other dark horse. BSD and Tsarukyan are the dark horses of this division. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up. Got to leave you guys with some closing thoughts here. First and foremost, if you're looking to work with me, you guys know you can shoot me an email scrolling below, or you can DM me on Twitter or Instagram. If you guys are looking to work with me for my official plays, you guys know we've been on fire for longer than the last quarter of this year. We were up 37 units or so dating to September. So we've been doing great there, but we are coming off some slight losses from the last card, which is the perfect time to work with me because it's very rare we go back to back with losing cards. I got my spot set up for this card, and we will be coming off another profitable night. So hit me up. I'm letting you guys know that now. And then just throwing some wisdom your guys' way, as I like to do. You guys know time to time. I'll say this much, maybe some thoughts for you guys to think of. A lot of times we throw our headphones in our ears as we're riding our bikes, as we're headed to the gym, and sometimes we constantly have this noise cramming into our head. The other night I took a late night bike ride to the gym, and I couldn't find my headphones. And fortunately, I didn't, because I had a great ride, had plenty of time to just have some deep thoughts going on and just kind of cleanse my mind as I went to the gym, had a workout with no noise cramming in my ear, no music blasting in my ear. And it actually felt pretty good. With that, taking that bike ride late at night, it was I don't know what you want to say, a euphoric type feeling. It was like a kind of a high, right? Like a runner's high, a bike high. And it felt good just not having the headphones cramming in my ears. Sometimes you guys need that. Sometimes you guys need to cleanse yourself and have some deep thoughts and just have that peace as well, that quiet peace as you're doing some of your activities. So think about that, try that out, see how it goes for you. Maybe a late night run to the gym or whatnot with no headphones, if you guys are putting too much headphones in your ear. And if you're putting your headphones in your ear, you better have the teller blasting and talking into your ears. All right, guys? All right, so I'll leave you with that. And on that note, wish you guys all a profitable event. Signing out. Teller.
Welcome to the show, this the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.